The martial arts expo was buzzing with excitement. Fans from all over the city had gathered to see some of the world's most elite fighters demonstrate their skills. Posters of UFC champions lined the walls, and the air smelled of energy drinks, sweat, and anticipation. Among the crowd stood one particular fighter, a UFC champion known as much for his knockout power as for his arrogance. Dressed in sleek athletic gear, he was already smirking, stretching with exaggerated movements, showing off to anyone who would watch. Every step, every glance seemed designed to announce, "I am the best. No one can touch me." He wasn't wrong. On paper, he was nearly unstoppable. But arrogance has a way of blinding even the most skilled. As he strutted past fans, he flexed, posed, and even mocked older martial artists trying to demonstrate their forms. "Come on, keep up, Grandpa," he joked loudly at a group of traditional karate masters. Laughter rippled through some of the younger spectators, but others exchanged uneasy glances. There was something about this fighter, raw talent, yes, but a confidence bordering on recklessness. And then, from the corner of the hall, a quiet figure entered the room. Tall, composed, wearing a simple black GI, eyes calm but intense. It was Steven Seagal. No fanfare, no flashy entrance, just presence. Where the UFC champion thrived on attention, Seagal demanded none. Yet the aura of mastery that surrounded him made even the boldest fighters pause. The champion noticed Seagal almost immediately. A grin spread across his face, part challenge, part amusement. Well, he said, loud enough for the crowd nearby to hear. "Look who decided to show up. Think you can keep up with me, old man?" The crowd laughed nervously, unsure whether this was a joke or a provocation. Seagal didn't respond. He merely stepped forward, calm and collected, letting the silence speak louder than words. Every eye in the room turned toward them. The tension thickened like fog, and spectators instinctively raised their phones. Something was about to happen, something the UFC champion had no idea he was walking into. Hope for part 2. What the champion did next would shock everyone, and make him instantly regret underestimating Steven Seagal. The crowd's excitement was electric. Phones were raised, capturing every second, as the UFC champion took a deliberate step closer to Steven Seagal. His grin widened, brimming with arrogance. "All right, old man," he said loudly, flexing his biceps. "Let's see if you can actually keep up. Come on, show me what you've got." Laughter rippled through some spectators, but the seasoned martial artists in the audience exchanged wary looks. They could sense the tension rising. The champion was used to dominating every fight, every sparring session, every show. To him, this was just another opportunity to flaunt his power, until he realized that the man before him wasn't just any opponent. Steven Seagal didn't flinch, didn't smile, didn't even glance at the champion's show of strength. He stood perfectly still, his posture relaxed, his eyes calm but sharp, scanning the champion's every movement. The air around him seemed to thicken. An invisible force of composure and skill radiated from him, unshakable and unassuming. The champion laughed, almost mocking, and squared up in a fighting stance. "Come on, don't just stand there. You're going to regret showing up if you don't fight." He lunged forward with a flashy spinning kick, a move he had perfected in countless UFC matches. Seagal moved, and the crowd gasped. With the slightest shift of his body, he sidestepped the kick effortlessly. It was subtle, almost casual, yet precise. The champion's foot sliced through empty air. He stumbled slightly, caught himself, and blinked, realizing he hadn't touched his target. "What?" the champion muttered, more to himself than anyone else. His smirk faltered. The crowd murmured in astonishment. Phones continued to record as whispers spread. Is this even real? Did he just dodge that without even moving? Fueled by embarrassment and ego, the champion tried another combination, a rapid flurry of punches designed to overwhelm. He moved fast, aiming for Seagal's torso and head, but Seagal flowed around him like water. Each punch was met with calm, precise deflection, his movements economical, almost lazy in appearance, yet deadly in efficiency. The UFC champion's confidence wavered slightly, though he refused to show it. All right, he said, gritting his teeth. You're fast, but I've got power. One hit, and it's over. He attempted a high-powered hook, swinging with everything he had. Seagal leaned back only slightly, allowing the punch to miss by inches. His calm expression never changed. The audience could hardly believe their eyes. A man known for lightning-fast UFC strikes was being outmaneuvered by someone half his age and half his aggression. Fans began whispering, "That's Steven Seagal. He's not even breaking a sweat." The champion hadn't even realized who he was dealing with. But now, the tables were slowly turning. Every missed strike, every failed combination chipped away at his confidence, replaced by a creeping sense of doubt. Sweat dripped down his forehead. His breathing grew heavier. He tried a flashy spinning kick again, hoping to intimidate. The crowd leaned forward in anticipation. Seagal sidestepped once more, then gently tapped the champion's shoulder to redirect his momentum. The force sent the champion off balance, stumbling forward into the mat with a thud. The sound echoed through the hall. Gasps erupted. Phones captured every second. The champion's face turned red, not from exertion, but from humiliation. Seagal didn't laugh. He didn't gloat. He simply helped the champion to his feet, speaking in a calm, steady voice. Power alone doesn't make a fighter. The UFC champion's ego shattered in real time. He realized he had underestimated not just Seagal's skill, but his presence, his calm mastery, and his ability to control the flow of combat with effortless precision. White medium star engagement break for part 2. Apko lagged a high UFC champion Jitega y Steven Seagal? Comment your pick, and tell Count SI country or County City SE Dek Rahi Ho. The crowd erupted into applause, not for the champion, but for Seagal. The UFC fighter's arrogance had led him into a lesson he would never forget. Humility and skill could outweigh raw power every time. And in that moment, the audience realized the fight wasn't just about strength. It was about mastery, control, and respect. The champion looked at Seagal, a mix of shock, awe, and embarrassment crossing his face. He had challenged the wrong man. And from this point on, everyone watching knew this challenge would be remembered and instantly regretted. The hall was buzzing with disbelief. Every spectator's phone was recording, capturing every subtle movement, every twitch of the champion's ego unraveling. The UFC fighter, once full of swagger, now stood stiff, his chest heaving, sweat gleaming under the bright expo lights. He couldn't hide it anymore. Seagal had exposed him, not just physically, but mentally. You're fast, the champion stammered, trying to regain control, but his voice lacked the confidence it had minutes ago. He tightened his fists, circling Seagal like a cornered predator attempting to regain dominance. Seagal remained calm, every step deliberate, his gaze steady. He didn't taunt, he didn't provoke. The silence he carried was heavier than any punch or kick, a quiet intensity that made the champion second-guess every move. The crowd felt it too, an almost tangible tension that hung between the two fighters. The champion attempted a series of quick jabs, more out of instinct than strategy. He swung with speed and power, hoping to catch Seagal off guard. But Seagal simply shifted, each movement economical, almost lazy, yet perfectly calculated. The champion's punches hit air, and the rhythm of the fight, if it could even be called that, was completely controlled by Seagal. A murmur ran through the crowd. How is he moving like that effortlessly? Is this even possible? The champion looked scared. Frustration began to show on the champion's face. He had never been matched like this. Not in the octagon, not in any sparring session, and certainly not in front of thousands of eyes. He felt exposed, humiliated. And with every failed attack, the The weight of embarrassment grew heavier. "Come on. You can't just dodge forever," he shouted, desperation creeping into his voice. His tone was sharp, aggressive, the kind of voice that often intimidated weaker opponents. But Seagal didn't flinch. He remained steady, a silent reminder that arrogance alone could not win a battle. The champion's frustration boiled over. He tried a spinning kick, faster and more violent than his earlier attempts. He moved like a hurricane, fully expecting to land a decisive blow. Yet Seagal sidestepped again, gently guiding the champion off balance with just a touch of his hand. The crowd gasped. Phones zoomed in on the moment. You could see the shock on the champion's face, his confidence completely shattered. Now the psychological battle began. The champion's ego, once unshakable, was cracking. Seagal didn't need to fight with aggression. Every calm, controlled action humiliated the champion more than any punch ever could. The audience leaned forward, captivated by the unexpected turn. This wasn't just a sparring match anymore. It was a masterclass in composure versus arrogance. Several spectators whispered to each other, "This is insane. The champion looks like he doesn't know what to do." A few laughed nervously, unable to believe what they were witnessing. One fan shouted, "He's losing his mind." The champion's eyes darted around, looking for an escape, but there was none. Seagal's presence alone was suffocating. Even the young martial artists who had been cheering for the champion were silent now, awestruck by Seagal's effortless control. Every feint, every dodge, every minimal movement displayed a level of mastery that made raw power seem insignificant. The champion finally paused, chest heaving, arms trembling slightly. He realized something critical. He had underestimated not just Seagal's physical skill, but his understanding of human nature. The lesson was clear. Arrogance was his weakness, and Seagal's calmness was his weapon. The crowd sensed the shift. Phones recorded every second as the champion's bravado faded into anxiety. Seagal's steady gaze, unbroken by fear or aggression, communicated one undeniable truth. This was a battle of minds as much as of bodies. And in this arena, the UFC champion was already losing. Hook for Part 4. Just when the champion thought he might escape humiliation, one spectator's gasp changed everything and made him realize who he was truly facing. The air in the expo hall had shifted completely. What began as a casual sparring exhibition had morphed into something far more intense. A clash of ego, skill, and presence. The UFC champion, once cocky and untouchable, now stood frozen for a fraction of a second, blinking in disbelief. He had dodged countless opponents before, but never like this. Never with such effortless mastery, such calm, such precision. And then it happened. From the far corner of the hall, a voice whispered, soft at first, barely audible over the murmurs of the crowd. "Wait, isn't that Steven Seagal?" The whisper spread like wildfire. Within seconds, dozens of spectators were murmuring, some pointing toward the legendary martial arts actor. "Oh my God, that is Steven Seagal," someone gasped, their phone already filming. Another shouted, "No way, the UFC champ is sparring with Seagal." The champion froze mid-movement, his arrogance faltering. His eyes widened as he followed the pointing fingers, trying to process what he had just heard. Steven Seagal, the action movie legend? The man famous for Aikido and decades of martial arts mastery? He had assumed this was just another fan or retired martial artist, someone he could show off against. Now the realization hit him like a punch to the chest. Seagal, as always, remained calm. He didn't need to raise his voice or flex his muscles. His presence alone told the story. A master of discipline and skill, decades of experience condensed into a single, unassuming figure. The crowd now fully recognized the stakes, and gasps and murmurs filled the room. Phones were everywhere, zooming in, capturing every motion. The champion's confidence wavered further. He took a cautious step back, suddenly aware of the weight of his arrogance. He had challenged the wrong man. The whispers grew louder. That's Steven Seagal. He's a legend. The UFC champ has no idea what he's in for. Seagal's expression remained neutral, almost serene. Yet the champion could feel the silent judgment emanating from him. The aura of mastery was undeniable, and it pressed down on the champion's ego like a physical force. The room felt smaller, heavier, charged with anticipation. The crowd wasn't just watching a fight anymore. They were witnessing a lesson in humility. The champion tried to mask his shock with bravado. "Yeah, I know who you are," he stammered, forcing a smirk. "But that doesn't mean you can keep up with me." Seagal didn't respond. He didn't have to. His calm stance, his steady eyes, and the way he moved even slightly with perfect timing communicated more power than any words could. Every person in the audience could see the shift in the UFC fighter's energy, arrogance melting into panic, confidence turning to uncertainty. Fans who had been rooting for the champion now cheered for Seagal. Children on the sidelines gasped. Older martial artists nodded knowingly, and even seasoned fighters in the crowd whispered to each other in awe. The champion's bravado was being dismantled not by strength, but by reputation, experience, and presence. He attempted another attack, more hesitant this time, swinging wide and reckless, but Seagal sidestepped smoothly. Every dodge, every subtle movement, made the champion stumble, exposing his lack of preparation for someone like Seagal. The crowd erupted into cheers, half in excitement, half in disbelief. Phones recorded the champion's faltering movements and Seagal's effortless control. White medium star engagement break for part 4. Appen Peli se Pachon Lia the coup, yes Steven Seagal hi? Comment, Pac-Man, or Seagal if you recognized him first. The champion's ego was in shambles. He had come to impress, to dominate, to assert his power. Instead, he had stepped into a masterclass, a living lesson on humility, respect, and the danger of underestimating someone's experience. Seagal didn't need to gloat. He simply stood there, poised, letting the champion flail and the audience witness. And in that moment, everyone watching understood. The UFC champion had just realized the true meaning of challenge wisely. The tension in the hall was almost unbearable. Every spectator knew the next move would define the champion's legacy, not just in the fight, but in the memory of everyone who was watching live and recording every second. Hook for part 5. Just when the champion thought he might recover, Seagal made a move that would completely humiliate him and leave the audience cheering in disbelief. The hall was electric, every spectator holding their breath. Phones were raised, capturing each movement, and the once confident UFC champion could feel the weight of everyone's gaze pressing down on him. He had underestimated Steven Seagal, and now, the reality was undeniable. Every flurry of strikes he attempted was met with effortless deflection. Every move exposed his recklessness. The champion's arrogance had led him straight into a masterclass in humility. "Come on," he barked, desperation creeping into his voice. "You're slowing me down. Hit me back." Seagal didn't respond with aggression. Instead, he moved with the calm of a man who had fought countless battles, both on screen and in real life. He let the champion make the first move, reading each strike, each intention, and responding with minimal effort, yet maximal effect. A simple sidestep, a redirect of momentum, a tap to the shoulder, all calculated, all precise. The champion's frustration became visible. Sweat streamed down his face as he swung wildly, trying to force an opening. The crowd could see the panic replacing the arrogance, the desperation replacing the cocky grin. The UFC champion, who had once intimidated thousands, now looked uncoordinated, exposed, and unsure of himself. Seagal finally decided it was time to intervene in a way the champion would never forget. With a swift, controlled motion, he redirected the champion's spinning kick, using the opponent's own momentum to send him stumbling forward. The champion landed on the mat with a loud thud, the impact echoing through the hall. Gasps erupted from the crowd, mixed with cheers of disbelief. Phones zoomed in, capturing the moment of pure humiliation. The champion scrambled to his feet, face red, jaw clenched. He tried to regain composure, but every muscle in his body betrayed his fear and frustration. You're just lucky, he spat, attempting to justify his failure. Seagal shook his head slowly, maintaining perfect poise. Luck? No. Discipline, experience, and control, he said, his voice calm, yet carrying undeniable authority. Your power is wasted without wisdom. Arrogance blinds you. The audience was stunned silent. Even seasoned fighters among the spectators exchanged knowing glances, nodding in agreement. The champion had finally realized what everyone else already knew. He was being humbled in front of the entire hall, and it wasn't going to be easy to recover from this. The champion tried one final desperate maneuver, a high-powered overhand strike, hoping to intimidate and regain some dominance. Seagal, with the grace of a master, sidestepped effortlessly and applied a subtle joint lock, redirecting the champion's force harmlessly. The crowd erupted into loud cheers. Phones captured every second. The champion froze, trapped by his own momentum, and finally, for the first time, understood the meaning of being outclassed. Seagal didn't shout, he didn't mock, he didn't gloat. He simply held the champion's wrist for a moment, then released it. Respect, he said, letting the word carry through the hall. It was a lesson, not just a defeat. The champion's ego crumbled completely. He stumbled backward, breathing heavily, his pride in tatters. He had come to prove his superiority, to challenge a legend, and instead, he had been shown the stark difference between arrogance and mastery. The crowd erupted in applause, not for brute strength, but for skill, control, and humility. Spectators whispered excitedly, phones recording every motion. That's insane, someone shouted. He didn't even try to hurt him. Every flurry, every failed attack, every stumble had cemented the lesson. Arrogance can be a fighter's worst enemy. And as the champion glanced at Seagal, eyes wide with disbelief and respect, he realized the full truth. He had walked into a master's domain completely unprepared. White medium star engagement break for part 5. Kia Apko Lagda High Champion Nebraska Yelesin Siklia? Comment yes or no. Seagal's calm, commanding presence had won without a single show of unnecessary force. And in that moment, the audience understood the difference between a master and a mere champion. It wasn't just speed or power, it was discipline, control, and humility. Hook for part 6. Just when the champion thought he had survived the embarrassment, Seagal's next move would cement his instant regret and leave the crowd in awe. The crowd had gone completely silent for a moment, caught between awe and disbelief. Every spectator's phone was pointed toward the two fighters, capturing what was quickly becoming an unforgettable spectacle. The UFC champion, once arrogant and full of bravado, now stood frozen mid-step, eyes wide, chest heaving, as the realization of his mistake fully sank in. He had underestimated not just a master, but a living legend. Seagal didn't rush, didn't shout, didn't show off. He simply moved with the calm precision of decades of experience, each motion deliberate and minimal, yet perfectly effective. The champion tried to strike again, a desperate, high-powered swing, but Seagal, reading every micro-movement in his opponent's body, sidestepped effortlessly. With a gentle tap, he redirected the UFC fighter's momentum, sending him staggering back several feet, arms flailing, before crashing to the floor. The thud echoed across the hall. Gasps and cheers erupted. Phones zoomed in on the moment, recording every detail. For the first time, the champion's eyes widened not with fear, but with a dawning, humiliating understanding. He had no idea what he had walked into. He scrambled to get up, trying to regain dignity, but Seagal moved with deliberate slowness, not in haste, but in absolute control. Each step, each subtle shift in posture reminded the champion and everyone watching that this wasn't a display of brute strength. This was a lesson in discipline, humility, and mastery. Spectators whispered excitedly. "Did you see that?" One gasped. "He barely moved, and the UFC champ is down." Another shouted, "Steven Seagal doesn't even need to fight hard. He's untouchable." The champion's breathing was ragged. Sweat poured down his face, and his jaw clenched in frustration and disbelief. He had thought himself invincible, and yet here he was, humbled in front of hundreds of witnesses and countless more online, as the moment was already being uploaded and shared across social media. Seagal finally approached the champion calmly, eyes steady, voice soft but commanding. "Power without wisdom is nothing," he said. "You came to prove yourself, but you challenged someone far beyond what you understood. Remember this: humility wins where arrogance fails." The crowd erupted into applause, not for brute force, but for control, for wisdom, for mastery displayed without a single ounce of unnecessary aggression. The champion lowered his head, fully aware that he had been humbled in the purest sense, by skill, experience, and composure. Even his supporters in the crowd were stunned into silence. The realization was universal. The UFC champion had challenged a legend and instantly regretted it. Phones captured the wide-eyed disbelief, the staggering movements, and the moment when the champion's ego had completely collapsed. Seagal didn't gloat. He offered a respectful hand, helping the champion to his feet, a gesture that transformed humiliation into a lesson. The champion hesitated, then accepted it, understanding that respect and humility were worth more than any victory or boast. White medium star engagement break for part 6. Kia Apko lagged a high UFC champion Nebraska Yelesin Sachmain Siklia? Comment yes or no. I want to know what you think. The crowd cheered wildly, not just for Seagal, but for the moment itself. Every recording, every shared clip would go viral. Millions would watch it, replay it, and marvel at how a legendary master had effortlessly humbled a modern-day champion. The champion's eyes darted around, meeting the gaze of every spectator. There was no shame in defeat, only the deep, humbling recognition of being bested by someone wiser, calmer, and more skilled. It was a moment of transformation, an instant regret so powerful that it would stay with him forever. As the hall erupted into applause again, Seagal stepped back, calm and serene, leaving the champion and the audience with a lesson that transcended martial arts. Arrogance may win battles, but humility and mastery win respect every single time. Hooked for part 7. The video of this legendary encounter went viral, and the world couldn't stop talking about it, proving once and for all that respect and skill matter more than ego. The Martial Arts Expo had turned into something far greater than anyone expected. What began as a simple sparring demonstration had become a spectacle that would be remembered for years. The day a legendary master effortlessly humbled a modern-day UFC champion. The crowd was still buzzing, replaying the highlights on their phones, sharing clips with friends, and uploading videos to social media. Within hours, the clips went viral. Millions across the world tuned in, watching the sequence of events unfold. The champion's arrogance, his overconfidence, the effortless control of Steven Seagal, and the ultimate moment of humiliation. Comments poured in from every corner. Unbelievable. Masterclass in humility. Arrogance doesn't win, skill does. The UFC champion, who had arrived full of confidence and ego, now faced not only the physical lesson of defeat, but also the emotional weight of public scrutiny. Videos showed him stumbling, flailing, and finally humbled by the calm, precise, and disciplined mastery of Seagal. He had underestimated someone whose experience transcended brute strength, and the world had witnessed it all. Seagal, as always, remained composed. He didn't need to celebrate, boast, or taunt. His calm presence, the gentle guidance he had given the champion, and the subtle but decisive control he demonstrated had already spoken volumes. In the eyes of the public, Seagal's legacy as both a martial artist and a master of discipline was reaffirmed, not through flashy displays, but through quiet, undeniable skill. Fans and martial artists everywhere praised the lesson. Online, the discussion turned to the importance of humility, discipline, and respect. People debated endlessly. Could the champion have won if he had approached the fight differently? Was this a lesson in arrogance, or a reminder that true mastery comes from years of experience and calm control? One thing was certain. Everyone agreed that Seagal had taught an unforgettable lesson. Meanwhile, the champion had no choice but to reflect. His pride had been shattered, his confidence tested, and his arrogance exposed. Yet, in the aftermath, there was a subtle transformation. By accepting Seagal's hand and the unspoken lesson, he had begun to understand what true skill, patience, and humility meant. For the first time, he realized that victories aren't measured by power alone, but by respect, discipline, and the wisdom to know your limits. The crowd at the expo, many of whom had filmed the entire encounter, continued to share the story. Memes, commentary videos, and reaction clips flooded the internet. Millions were inspired, not just by Seagal's skill, but by the lesson in humility and mastery that transcended martial arts. Arrogance may dominate a room briefly, but respect and skill resonate forever. White Medium Star final call to action. If you believe humility and respect are more powerful than arrogance, type respect in the comments. Share this story with friends, and subscribe for more epic, inspiring moments like this one. In the end, it wasn't just a fight. It was a reminder that confidence without wisdom can crumble, that ego can lead to instant regret, and that mastery is always recognized, even without words. The UFC champion had challenged a legend and learned a lesson he would never forget, while the world watched, inspired, and applauded the true meaning of discipline. And as Seagal exited the hall, calm and composed as ever, everyone knew one thing. Some battles are won not by strength, but by the quiet power of experience, patience, and unwavering mastery. The video clips would be shared, replayed, and celebrated across the globe, cementing the story as one of the most unforgettable lessons in humility and skill. A tale that would inspire countless fighters, fans, and spectators for years to come.